Good morning, Jasper Wildcats, and happy Halloween, and welcome to this week's Wildcat Weekly. This week's episode will feature news and sports. First up, a Wildcat news update. Today is the last day to purchase a yearbook at the lowest price of the year. If you would like to purchase one, you can visit the link attached to the Wildcat news release. Secondly, on Monday, November 11th at 10 a.m., Jasper High School will host a program to honor our veterans on Veterans Day. All veterans are welcome to attend and will have reserved seating on the gym floor. We are requesting your help in honoring our veterans. Please email Mrs. Schum if you have a grandparent, parent, sibling, and aunts or uncles who have served in the military. This Friday, the Wildcats will take on the F.J. Wright's Panthers in the semifinals of sectionals. This is an important game for the Cats. Let's talk to Coach Lewis on the pregame preparations for this week.
Well, I think one of the key players that for Wrights that is a new key player for them is number 5. I think his name is Brian Darrett. One of the receivers, number 7, is a key player. We have to do a great job of getting pressure on their quarterback, number 14, Davies. Number 21 is their main running back, does a great job running the football hard. For us, I think a lot of it comes down to our offensive and defensive line. I feel like if we can control the line of scrimmage up front.
The theater has their fall performance, Guys and Dolls, November 14th through 17th. They've been working very hard to build their sets for performance. Here's Mrs. Lebehusen with more. What should people be most excited for whenever it comes to this production?
The gorgeous sets that were designed by most of our seniors who even painted most of those signs.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Now let's take it over to Sports Corner for your football updates.
Welcome to this week's episode of Sports Corner, where we talk about everything sports related. I'm your host, Dylan Durkles, alongside Eli Clark, joining you on this spectacular Halloween. In store for this episode will be a Thursday night football preview, college football preview, and a fantasy football tips segment.
Starting off tonight at 8:15, the Houston Texans are trying to stay one of the most dominant teams in the AFC against the New York Jets. The Texans are coming off another close game against the Colts, winning 23-20. C.J. Stroud and Joe Mixon were both excellent in their respective positions, with Stroud throwing for 285 yards and a touchdown on 25 completions, and Mixon rushing for 102 yards and a touchdown on 25 carries. The Jets came short in a very close game in their AFC rival, the New England Patriots. Aaron Rodgers threw for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns on 17 completions, and Garrett Wilson caught 5 receptions for 113 yards. This game should be very close, especially on the Jets' home turf, but I believe the Texans will sneak out with a win, 38-28. What about you, Dylan?
I do have to agree with you, Eli. The Texans have quietly had a good year to this point, even with injuries to their top 2 receivers, Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. I do believe Houston will be able to reciprocate their success against a good Jets defense and will pull out the win 24-20. Now transitioning over to college football, where as opposed to last week, this week will be much easier to predict. The only game we really see being a toss-up is between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Ohio State is ranked 4th at this point at a record of 6-1. Not to take anything away from them, but they haven't played much competition except for Oregon and Nebraska. They lost to Oregon by 1 and beat Penn State by 4. Ranked just 1 above Ohio State, Penn State stands in at 3rd with a record of 7-0. Penn State has good wins over Illinois, USC, and Wisconsin. It will be an all-out clash to see who remains towards the top seed of the Big Ten. Speaking of the Big Ten, the Hoosiers are set to take on Michigan State. Their record could mislead you as they stand in at 4-4. They lost to Ohio State and Oregon, both top 5 teams, as well as Boston College and Michigan. The Hoosiers got a nice win last week against Washington, despite Curtis Rourke being injured. Indiana stands in at 13th in the top AP 25 poll. With the addition of Oregon amongst this already stacked Big Ten, this Big Ten tournament seeding is still up in the air.
Now switching it over to fantasy football. Last week our predictions were pretty good. Bo Nix and Ladd McConkey both had huge games, scoring 29 points. But for this week, starting it off at the quarterback position, I'm taking Drake May. Last week against the Jets, he did get injured with a head injury, I believe, and he's still questionable to play, but if he does end up playing, Drake May will be great. In the 2 games that he played the full game, he scored around 20 points each game, and last week he put up 11 while only playing 1 quarter. Drake May should stomp all over the struggling Titans defense team this Sunday.
My pick for quarterback is Matthew Stafford. We saw last week how good he can be when his weapons are healthy. Both Kupp and Nacua were back in action, and Stafford threw for over 275 yards and 4 touchdowns. This week he matches up against the Seahawks, who gave up over 280 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air last week. As a division rival game, this one's always high scoring, and expect nothing else but a shootout between Geno Smith and Matthew Stafford.
At my running back position, I'm taking Bucky Irving against the Chiefs. The past 3 weeks, he has consistently been getting 15-plus points. He doesn't rush very much, as that spot is for Rashad White, but he has been getting multiple receptions, in which he had 7 against the Falcons. The Chiefs have a pretty strong defense, so having Bucky Irving as that safety receiver should help him get a lot of points.
For my running back, give me Chuba Hubbard against the Saints. Last week, they gave up a touchdown to J.K. Dobbins. Chuba's had over 10 rushes in 7 of his 8 games this season, and this may be his last full workload, as the looming threat of rookie Jonathan Brooks might be getting partial reps this week as he's returning from injury. Whether Bryce Young or Andy Dalton plays, Chuba will be leaned on heavy regardless.
Finishing it off at wide receiver, I'm choosing Josh Downs. Anthony Richardson is being benched this week, and Joe Flacco will be getting the start against the Vikings, so Josh Downs should have a high-scoring week. Downs has been hot this season, scoring 15-plus points in 4 of the 6 games he's played, 3 of those with Joe Flacco at quarterback. In a must-win game for the Colts on Sunday Night Football, Josh Downs needs to have an excellent game, and I believe he will.
And last but not least, at my wide receiver, I have Romeo Doubs. He's at over 10 fantasy points in each of the past 3 weeks. He has a good matchup this week against the Lions, who gave up over 140 yards to Calvin Ridley last week. Doubs may be the wide receiver 2 in this young electric Packer offense, but he still gets incredible volume with Jordan Love under center. Speaking of Love, he is questionable this week after a groin sprain last week. So if Love plays, definitely expect Doubs to have a big week against the division-leading rival Detroit Lions.
That's going to be it for this week's episode of Sports Corner. Hope you all enjoyed this segment of Wildcat Weekly. Have a great Halloween and a 3-day weekend. I'm Eli Clark alongside Dylan Dirkles. See you next week.
Thank you for watching this week's Wildcat Weekly, and make sure you tune in next week and have a great rest of your day.